Hey everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 46. I'm interviewing Mitch Bowler from Pencil Kings, and this episode is all about taking action and building your own fate by going out and doing what you want to do, chasing your dreams and building the ultimate dream career that's for you. And I guarantee this episode is going to rock your world. I've wanted to do this episode for a very long time, and I think it's going to be really insightful and inspirational and awesome. Let's do this.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
Okay, so this episode is awesome. It's an episode with a really good friend of mine who is also someone that I know is going to be so valuable to a lot of you who are interested in building more freedom and maybe kind of inspiring yourself to get out and try something big. I always say to get out of your comfort zone and you got to be in it to win it. And Mitch is a prime example of this, where he went from working at Activision and a lot of other companies doing the typical grind that a lot of us go through to deciding that he wanted more. He wanted to do something even more epic and create his own lifestyle that allowed him to travel and live life like I think a lot of us should be, with our own business and helping others, but at the same time looking at the big picture and finding new ways to challenge ourselves with our own business, our own challenges that we want to build. So this is going to be a really exciting episode. Before we go into it, I just want to mention a couple of things. So first of all, thanks everyone for coming out to the industry drinks last week. That was a heck of a lot of fun. It was good to hang out with everyone, meet some new people, and we'll be doing another one quite soon. So if you want to check it out, go to www.alanmckay.com/drinks to sign up if you're in Los Angeles or in the surrounding areas. If you want to go for a bit of a drive, got people coming from Irvine and all over the place. At the same time, SIGGRAPH is this week, so I'm still figuring out my plans. I've been flat out, so I'm not quite sure if I'll actually make it to SIGGRAPH, but I'll probably pop into a few of the parties and just say hi to a few people, so I will do my best. But if I do make it, then look out for me on the floor somewhere. We'll also be doing another reel review very shortly. I'll announce that very soon. And finally, the contest that I'm running is going to be end of this month. And what I'll be doing is the winner will have the opportunity to spend an hour or two one-on-one with me. I want to sit down and go through your career goals and actually do a one-on-one career coaching session. So this will be a chance for you to work on your goals as well as establish a plan, and this can be completely catered to you step by step on how to get to those goals, as well as doing a follow-up a couple of months later to see where you're at and what your sticking points are from there. So I think this will be really valuable for the winner of this, and I don't typically do this. I have with various colleagues in the past, but not as intense as I will be here. So this will be something that I think is very valuable for anyone. And if you want to be a part of this, just go to iTunes, to my podcast, leave a review. It doesn't need to be long. It can be 1 or 2 lines. If you want to leave a longer one, totally fine too. But just leave a hashtag VFX1. So VFX1 at the bottom, just to indicate this is for the contest. And I'll be announcing the winner at the end of the month, as well as then organizing a session that we can do one-on-one. So I think this is going to be a really valuable and also a lot of fun to do. And I'm looking forward to it. So in the meantime, let's get into this episode with Mitch Bowler from Pencil Kings.
So what the hell am I up to? Well, these days I'm living in Germany because I met a great girl and she happens to live in Germany. And so I had the possibility, because of my business is not based at any specific location, that I could come here and stay with her and then help her join me on the road when we eventually go to Thailand in October. And I guess kind of it's like I've been on this search for maybe almost 10 years now, where to find the perfect retirement spot. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you're, we're all going to retire someday. And so I thought, well, why not make that come sooner? And there's sort of a breakthrough moment in my mindset when I was about 21 or so, or 22. I mean, I can't remember if we had met at that point. I don't think we...
I was just thinking about this before, because I think we have two versions of how we met, because I think I'd heard, like, someone had told me I have to meet you, and but I have a feeling I met you just before you moved to China, and it was at the Blur party in LA, I think. But then again, I think I've talked to you about this, and you have a different recollection. So
no, I think it was then, but I can't remember if Blur was after or before. But anyway, the thing that happened in China was that I lived in this city called Xiamen, which you probably never heard of it and probably can't pronounce it or look it up on a map, but it's Xiamen if you want to.
Damn, there's always an X.
And I was living there for literally $500 a month, and this was not like scrimping and saving. I would have my own flat to myself. I ate out every single meal. I wasn't cooking for myself because there's just lots of food all over the place at kind of like any hour of the day. And I wasn't partying a lot, but there definitely was funds to go out with friends and have some beers and whatnot. And for $500 a month. So this completely shattered my reality of what's possible. And so since then, I've been on the hunt to find the best place to live and the place that I would like to settle down. So that's why I'm always bouncing around, looking, I'll read about somewhere online, or I'll be following somebody and they live in this particular place. And then I'll go and meet them wherever they're at and see what it's like to be there.
Wow. It's kind of funny because I'm kind of going through the same thing now, where it's not on such a large scale. Because I do have a feeling if it was, it would end up being kind of lame, but it'd be Canada or Australia. But for me right now, it's kind of like I want to buy a home, and suddenly it's like, well, I don't want to buy in LA because it's literally a markup of about 400%. So now, all these cities I've never been to, every weekend I'm going to be flying out to one just to kind of check out this city or that city, just to kind of get a vibe for it in the US. But, I just like the timing of that. But I love that, actually. It's kind of cool that, especially when you're a bit younger, you're like, okay, well, where's the kind of place that is best for me? And like, instead of it being like, well, here's where I am, time to, set my roots here, it's more about, well, let me go find my place, my paradise that I can call home, and throw a stick down the beach and have the dog running into the sunset to catch it or something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, too, where I grew up in a little tiny village of about 650 people, I knew I wasn't going to end up there. And then when I went to university, and we both worked at the same company, Frantic Films, in Winnipeg, although at different times, I was never really jazzed on that city. So I knew I wasn't going to end up there. And so I don't feel like I had any roots. I needed to go and find somewhere. So I feel like some people are blessed and they're born in amazing cities, and it's like, why would you ever want to leave when you're already there? Yeah,
it's kind of funny because I do feel, at least when I was younger, especially, and again, I'm going to relate back to the US, but especially when I was younger, this is where I wanted to be, and it was, my ultimate goal was to go to Hollywood and do all that stuff, and I kind of felt like people who lived here are taking it for granted, because suddenly for me, it's like I had to get a visa and I had to work to that point where I could even ever kind of step foot over here. And I think for a lot of people who are living in smaller cities, you kind of expect that the people who live in the bigger ones have that kind of upper hand a little bit. They have a bit more opportunity than you might. And so for you to actually kind of get out of the norm and break away from probably everyone else is pretty happy and also used to the practice of day-to-day living in that small bubble. It kind of takes a big move to kind of jump out of there and say, okay, I'm going to go and move to a bigger place and create my own opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. But if you're willing to do it, I mean, sometimes that's all the hustle that you need. Like if you have that initiative to leave your home and to prove yourself, you're maybe like already stronger than a lot of people that are on the scene because they didn't have to overcome those hurdles.
I absolutely agree, completely. So that's one thing I find is like a lot of people who are travelers, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree with this as well. Usually they have a lot of kind of commonalities about them. It's that they're independent, they're willing to take chances, they're go-getters, and it's not about a lot of the other people, it doesn't matter if you're in a big city or not. It doesn't mean that you have that drive. It just means you're fortunate enough to be born in a city that's got a lot of opportunity around it. But the ones who actually kind of get there themselves are the ones that are more self-made and more motivated.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of curious. I mean, you worked in visual effects for quite a while, as well as video games. It's funny because I was just working for Activision across the street from where you were working years and years ago. But you're same age as me, and I think you started out around the same time. Like, what was it like when you first started out? Like, was Frantic Films your first gig?
That was my second gig. So there was a little tiny company out in the countryside, and I guess my dad had met the owners, and he had said, "Hey, you should talk to my son. He he helped build this." At the time, it was like this giant website, and they knew of that website, so they're like, "Holy man, if this kid is helping projects on that scale, we should definitely see what he's doing." So I started there doing flash animation for television commercials and web shorts and stuff. I think this was during the .com boom, but then it was Frantic Films after that.
Mm-hmm. And what was the first project you worked on at Frantic?
It was XMen 2. What an awesome first project. Yeah.
That's cool. I like that because I think at one point I came over for XMen 3. Yeah, 3. And I remember like talking with all the like Pennington and all those guys. I'd go to lunch with them and I'd be like, yeah, so what's going on the show, because I didn't really care that much. And everyone's like, yeah, X-Men 3, like everybody dies. And I'm like, huh? Then I finally see it. I'm like, no shit, everybody dies. But that's cool. Like, X-Men 2 was like one of the big kind of game changers for Frantic at the time. Definitely put them on the map.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just for anyone who doesn't know, like Frantic Films now was like one of the main studios of Prime Focus. Although now that they own Double Negative, I guess they're their new show pony. But Frantic worked on Superman Returns, worked on like a boatload of like pretty high-profile films, and I loved them at the time. Like they definitely had their shit together. But,
yeah, I think their big like breakout shot was Swordfish, and they had that that slow. I forget what the actual technical term for it is, but the
kind of bullet time-ish.
That's
well, actually, it was kind of bullet. I always correct people when they talk about bullet time when it's dead time, because dead time was the original, which is everything just freezes completely because it's one photo, but then Gator and those guys kind of put together the whole bullet time thing. So yeah, that's where they did the big panning around the city street explosion shot with the Claymore, which was pretty cool back in the day with fusion and everything. Yeah, that was pretty cool, and yeah, that definitely kind of put them on the map, and then from there they kind of evolved. It's kind of funny because two of the owners, or there's three owners, but Chris Bond, who now owns ThinkBox Software, Ken Zorniak, who was a manager of Safeway. I actually met Ken first, and we met up in Shanghai. And he was completely jet lagged, and we ended up going through Shanghai, Beijing, and then through Seoul in Korea. And yeah, it's kind of funny because it was for like a discrete like Autodesk a promo thing, and so I got to know him a lot more informally than I ever got to know him formally when we ended up working together later on. But yeah, lots of drinking, soju, and everything else in between. So I'm just kind of curious, like you worked in visual effects and 3D for quite a while, and eventually you moved to LA. The transition from going from Winnipeg, which is relatively, 650 people might be a small town, but Winnipeg is still a pretty small town or city as well. So how do you kind of transition to Los Angeles into Activision?
Because I was in LA with Frantic originally, and then like several years later, I went with Activision, and it was a completely different experience both times. And so specifically when I was with Activision, like to be brutally honest, it was a really rough time for me personally, because I just somebody really close to me had passed away, and so I was pretty much just a recluse. I would go into the office and do my work, and I feel like I was very good at my job, but then at night I'd be learning about how internet businesses work and working on websites. I just basically stayed at home a lot. I was a pretty boring person. Like we hung out a little bit, but that was a pretty dark 2 years, and nothing to do with working at Activision. The projects we had were really cool. The team we had was great, but just for me personally, it was a bit of a dark time. And it's almost like time stopped for those 2 years, and I didn't do a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, I think that's when we kind of reunited was we ended up at Avalon, which is like the biggest nightclub in LA, of all places. But and I think you were flying out to China that morning.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, okay. I don't know. I didn't actually know until later. But I think that's kind of where we met back up briefly, and then caught back up after that. But like, yeah, it did sound like you're going through some hellish times back then. And yeah, I mean, for you to, I don't know, did that kind of help you in your decision making a little bit? Like just from deciding that, where you're at right now and everything else that's going on in your life, like to decide that you want to try and do something bigger or different or get out of the kind of rut that you're in?
I don't know. I guess like I always knew I wanted to do something bigger. For me, it's always been a seesaw of working at a studio and saving as much money as I can, and then trying to start my own business, and then failing or having some small success or whatever the situation may be, and then going back to the studio and then doing my own thing. But I think this time, like that Activision stint was my last studio stint, and with what I've learned in the last 4 years on my own, I don't think that I would go back to a studio, although I do miss hanging out with the teams and working on a project with everybody and all the social stuff. That's always great. But I like having the freedom, and I was kind of an eye-opener that even when you're at like a higher level position, if you're a full-time guy, in the US at least, you're a full-time guy. Like it doesn't matter where you are in the project, your vacation time is capped. It's sort of just like a cultural thing. And I know there's exceptions, but the general rule is, you've got your 2 weeks and your sick days. And I was lucky that my team was a little bit more gracious because we were working a lot with China. So we got time off when China was doing time off. But if you're from out of country, I mean, those vacation days get ate up pretty quick when you go home for Christmas. And so I think the sort of like the free path, or the path that I'm on right now, where I'm the master of my own destiny, that's the path that I'll stay on.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, like I've never really been a big fan of staff jobs, just because I wouldn't be able to take time off when I want to. And for me, for the longest time, I think I was in Vancouver when I kind of discovered this more, looking at the pattern every year, but I would always take about 8 to 12 weeks off a year. And everyone I think would probably think that's insane, but over time, like, I would, especially back in production, I would burn it really hard. I'd be doing 3 projects, not getting much sleep. So I think it's more about recovery in that regard. But these days, it's more, you want to be able to create your freedom to do what you want and not think, okay, well, I'm going to have to go back at Christmas. It's June now, so unfortunately, I don't get to have any, getaway during summer or whatever, just because, those 2 weeks are going to be, back in whatever country or city. And yeah, just having such a small allotted amount of time to kind of have the freedom to do what you want is just, I don't know, I kind of hope things change a little bit for a lot of companies, because it's kind of very restricting in terms of you work 50 weeks of the year, and you get your designated 2 days to recover, and the rest of the time you're literally grinding yourself to a halt in production.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. So like, you were in the background, you're already doing that. You're already trying to work on a few exit plans. Like, did you have anything kind of clear what the hell you wanted to do when you're still at Activision? Like for you, when you decided to quit, because I know you went back to Canada for a tiny little bit while you kind of readjusted to your new plan. And I don't think I was even 100% clear. I just remembered I went to your going away party. Cool roommates. So yeah, I don't think I was 100% clear about like what you had planned, but I knew that you were kind of wanting to make a big transition in your life at the time.
Yeah, so while I was at Activision, I had started a website, sorry about that, years and years ago, called drawingcoach.com. It's still up, and if somebody's listening and they go to that site, they'll just be like, wow, this art is just terrible. And so that was kind of the idea, that I wanted to do something, and it was more about learning the business of like, how do you make money when you sleep? That's what I literally Googled one Christmas break.
So you actually Googled that phrase?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And so then I found a program and I started applying it, and I said, I'm going to do step-by-step drawings for children. And I because I'm a 3D artist, so my sketching skills, they were good when I was in university, but then they just kind of deteriorated where now I can storyboard and illustrate ideas quickly to show people like a concept, but they're not near where they used to be. But anyway, I just set this website up and I said, I know these drawings are really bad, but I'm not here to be the best artist. I'm here to learn how to make money while I sleep, which sounds so scammy and cliche or whatever, but that's literally what it was. And so I set up the site Drawing Coach, and then while I was at Activision, I continued on that path and was leveraging what I had done with Drawing Coach in the site. Here's the thing: you can look at it and be like, "Wow, this is really terrible." That's great. Go ahead and make a better one. And like I would encourage people to make a better one because there's a huge opportunity here for people wanting to learn how to draw. And the reality is that the site was like wildly successful. Generated tons of emails. Teachers love this site. Kids love this site. Even adults love the site. And so if you're holding yourself back because you feel like you're not good enough to start something, it's really just all in your head. You probably have all this. Probably have more than enough skill right now, no matter where you're at, to teach somebody something.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking with a lot of people recently. I did a bit of a survey, and like the number one thing I think that everyone has that holds them back is like fear of failure. And so it's kind of the number one thing that makes them not even try in the first place, just because the what if I fail? What if people laugh at me, whatever. And the thing is that you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to fail a few times to succeed. And yeah, I think for everyone who's kind of, I was coaching a friend of mine recently starting his own business, and for him, he wanted everything to be perfect. It had to be, he wouldn't use any custom software sites or anything. It had to be all his own stuff. And it's like, all right, you're never going to get started if you do this. You got to go MVP, like minimum viable product. You don't want to say, okay, I'm going to build the Porsche of my business right away. But no, it's great, man. And like, I'm kind of curious, like for you, so you committed to that. You're like, I'm going to, because for me, I think this is such an important thing, is like that turning point where you decide you're going to do something big, which is I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to focus on something that I'm hoping will, give me at least enough finances to have freedom in my life to do what I want, rather than being kind of a slave to the typical 9 to 5 that most of us go through. And so what was, it was a pretty big risk, I guess, at the same time. Like, were you 100% sure you're going to succeed? Did you have a fallback plan? If I'll give this 6 months, and if I fail miserably, I'll move on to knocking on Activision's door or whoever, or Tim Hortons back in Canada.
Yeah, I guess I always knew that I could go back to a studio, because every time that I've left my job, they don't want me to leave, because I definitely I work really hard and I'm pretty fun to be around, and I try to inspire everybody around me to do better work, and maybe even more so to try and have fun in the office by just being goofy and weird and just, I don't know, making it fun. Mm-hmm. And so I guess for me, I've always been a good saver, but because I was through in that dark period, like I talked about before, I really wasn't spending anything in LA. I had a modest apartment. I had a bicycle. I didn't have a car, if you can believe it. 2 years in LA.
I don't have a car, but now we have Uber, so.
Oh yeah, there was no Uber back then.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just saved up, a decent amount of money from doing that, and that gave me the runway that I needed. And then because I had already set up, Drawing Coach and another couple websites that were making passive advertising revenue, and I had other money coming in as well, so it didn't feel too risky to me. But if I didn't have that safety net, then yeah, I guess I would have. If I was in that situation where I didn't have anything, I would be calling my parents and saying Mom and Dad, I know I'm 30 years old, because I quit just before my 30th birthday.
Right.
And I was back in Canada for my 30th. And, I'd say, I'm 30, I'm coming back home to move in the basement. I hope that's okay. But I mean, I wouldn't feel any shame in doing that, because I'm following the path that I want to be on. And I think that that's what the real thing is. I know what I want to do, and so I'm willing to sacrifice a lot of things in order to do that.
That's great, man. And I think that's the thing, is that most people, I meet a lot of people who are like, oh, I really want to do this, but like I said before, they don't do it just because the what if, excuse me, what if I fail? What if, it doesn't work out? And because of that, it's just one of this massive procrastination that they go through. And even, I think it's more about minimizing risk. So, for me, growing up, I didn't have, I was paying rent with my mom when I was 14, and I never had that home to go back to. And I always kind of, especially when I was younger, I kind of resented a lot of my friends who they would move out and they would go get a job. And if they failed, it's all right, I'll just move back in with mom and dad. And for me, it's if I fail, and I had at one point in my life when I was in my late teens, actually had a week where I didn't have a home just because of that. And it's kind of if you fail, it's there is consequences rather than rolling back. But the reason I mention that is just because As you grow older, obviously it's a little bit different, but like everyone's risk of like what their worst case scenario is usually not going to be that bad, and you can always minimize it too. So if you're thinking, hey, I've always wanted to go out and set up this this business or this idea, I want to launch a 3D printing business, whatever, but I don't want to quit my job because XYZ, then you can still work in the, you know, on the weekends and in the mornings. It's just a matter of being motivated to dedicate time in the beginning to kind of get that happening, and then from there you can start to roll off as you see results. So whatever your risk factors are, you can go all in and say, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do this, and worst case scenario, I crash on a friend's couch for a few weeks until I, you know, go back to what I'm doing for a little bit, or and then you retry. But or you know, you can still stay at your job, but you need to dedicate time, so that way, you know, you do at least 10 hours a week or whatever it's going to be, but you find whatever is going to minimize the risk that does hold you back, I think.
Definitely. I thought of it, I didn't think of it. I was interviewing somebody, and they told me that what they did was they had a good relationship with their boss or manager, whoever was above them, and what they did was they negotiated unpaid time off. So they knew that their job was still there for them if they needed it, but they had 3 months or 6 months, I forget what it was, to go and work on their project full time. And that's all the runway that they needed to make it go. And so I think that's like a really low risk option that people could use. And then the other thing too is that there's all these hours in the morning that people just use for sleep, or you know, watching TV or reading a magazine or flipping on your phone or whatever.
Or a podcast.
And that's and that's how I got started. Was my girlfriend at the time, she had to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to get picked up by a bus because she worked in this school that was like outside of the city. So she got picked up really early, and I just said, well, if she's waking up, I'm just going to wake up as well, and I'm going to work on my drawing coach site for 3 hours in the morning. And I didn't do it every day, but I did it enough that I started to get momentum. And then once you start to see the results of the stuff, then it becomes addictive, and you're like, holy crap, you know, like people are seeing this, they're commenting on it, they love it. This is bigger than I ever imagined. You know, drawing coach was way more successful. And I think, you know, everybody's worried about, well, what happens if it doesn't work out? And it's like, what happens if it works out way better than you ever thought it would? And a lot of times when people take action, this is what happens, because it's just like a stepping stone. You take some action and it leads to this other thing, which is you could have never imagined. And then that opens the door over here, and that's even bigger. And you just keep, the snowball keeps growing as it rolls down the hill. Yeah,
no, that's such good advice. And the thing is too, like, even if it doesn't, like, one thing I get criticized by a few of my friends about is that whenever I do something, even if I do it well and it's a huge success, I still look at all the negative stuff. And I'm not being a pessimist. I'm actually more just saying, okay, well, what can I get from this? So even the great stuff that doesn't like fizzle and fail out at all, I'm still looking at like, okay, well, what could I have done better? And so I think because of that, it's more about the learning experience. So even if like you do something and it doesn't work out, the thing is the next time around, you're like, all right, well, now I know not to do this, this, and this. So it's kind of like testing the waters before you, you try again. And the next time around, you've got so much more experience than you didn't have before. So, I don't think there is such a thing as failure in that regard. And one thing, like one of my students who's actually been on the podcast, Joel, he brought up a good point because he wanted to do my mentorship. So to find time, he just gets up 2 hours earlier every day. And the thing is, I think for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I don't have time, but they're going to sleep. Usually they start watching TV at 7 p.m. They finish watching at 1 a.m. They get up at 8 a.m. They drag their carcass into, clothes and go to work. And the thing is, you could get up at 6 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. And let's say you work 8 or 9 hours a week. Well, doing 2 hours every morning, you're essentially going to get 8 hours a week from that, which is an entire full day. So you're giving yourself an entire day a week extra to work on whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's so crucial. And I used to feel like I went to bed before 10 p.m. that I was a, quote unquote old person. And it was really like a mindset that was holding me back. And now I try to get to bed, between 9 and 10 every night. And my goal would be to get to bed at 9. But then I still have this old person mentality. But this allows you to wake up really early, very easily. So that, I usually wake up at about 5:30 in the morning, and then I'm pretty fresh in the morning, and I can get the important work done before. I feel like I'm still wired that once 9 a.m. hits, it's like I just open my inbox by default, and then you never know what's going to be in your inbox and how your day is going to go. But those early morning hours, those are yours. That's where you're totally in control.
That's great. You essentially have different personalities. It's kind of refreshing when you feel like you've already accomplished so much. Then you're like, oh, everyone else is starting their day now. And I actually, one point I'll make, which is a bit off topic, but usually whenever I've got to do like all-nighters or late nights at the office, what I do instead is, and this is more to do with production, like, but like I'll usually go in early in the morning instead. So I might start my day at 5 a.m., but I'll still leave at 6 p.m. So the thing is that I'm probably getting an extra 5 hours in, whereas most people would leave at 11 o'clock at night and do the same amount of hours. But by me coming in early in the morning, no one else is around. So I've got the entire place empty. I can focus. The render farm, if you're working in 3D, usually everything's rendered from the night before, and you can completely focus. And then the thing is that most of the time, everyone else is asleep anyway. So if you were going to spend quality time with friends, no one's going to be awake and wanting to hang out at 6 or 5 in the morning. But if you're leaving at a normal hour, you can still have a social life and still go about your day. So for me, I've always opted to work early mornings and get a shitload more done than to work till midnight every night, and suddenly I'm depressed. I don't get to see my friends or anyone, and it's basically no joy in your life. So it's kind of good just to kind of, I think, take advantage of the mornings and make them your own and get a shitload more done. But no, it's really great, man. And like I love your work ethic. I love like a lot of how you've kind of approached a lot of what you're doing. And I'm just kind of curious. So like you went to Canada, and I'm following this kind of timeline just because I think this is probably the most important part, is like you quitting your job, going to Canada to kind of have a plan to build something bigger so you can have a lot more freedom to do what you're passionate about. And so did you go back with an exact game plan, or did you find it took a little bit of time to kind of get into the groove of, before your productivity kind of shot up, or was it like hit the ground running as soon as you got back?
I think I hit the ground running as soon as I got back. I knew what I wanted to do, and I felt a lot of the times, like when I was in my corporate gig, that I didn't have enough time for the business that I eventually was going to start. And so it was kind of like I felt constrained, and I had all this energy for the project. So I just dove into it. But I will say that during that time, I made like a classic entrepreneurial mistake, and I had too many projects on the go. So I think I had 2 or 3 different, I was starting a web design company, and I was starting a SaaS app to track your goals and earn achievements and stuff. And then I was also starting the business that eventually I was going to, that I'm doing today, Pencil Kings. And it was just way too much, but I had a lot of energy for all of it. And I was like busy spinning on the hamster wheel.
That's great, man. And so I guess at that point, like when did you find that you kind of got to that point where you're like, okay, things are gonna be okay? Because like I'm sure everyone has that nervous point of like, okay, am I crazy? Especially when you're working by yourself, because you don't really have anyone else around to I guess compare yourself to, or just kind of keep yourself sane. So was there a certain point you're like, all right, I got this, I'm gonna be all right?
Well, when I started things, I started with a friend. So there was 2 founders, but the point when things were okay with the business and like everything is going to be all right, that was years.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't something. I'm jealous of how fast other people seem to be able to be successful, and it may be because I had that passive income already, and there wasn't as big of a fire. But I think I just didn't really understand the business model, and because I was going after, I guess you would call it like a volume play. So there's different types of businesses you could have where you offer a specific service and you charge a lot for it. I think that's a lot smarter than doing something like, I'm going to charge everybody $5. All I need is 1 million customers, and then I'm making $5 million a year. Yeah. That was kind of our mentality, but we didn't realize how difficult it would be to get 1 million customers. Like, I don't even know how long it took Facebook to get 1 million customers, but it wasn't like they just turned on the lights at Facebook and they had 1 million customers. All this stuff takes time, even for the biggest, most successful companies. And so because of our choice of business model, it took us a really long time to kind of get over that hump where we were to the point where it's like, okay, this is going to be okay. And along the way, of course, we were building a team so that we could support, the customer base that we have and everything else.
That's cool. And that's one thing. Is like I've never heard of any company or any business or any idea that just happened overnight. Like on the surface, it's like, oh yeah, like, we launched it and then it all went big. But it's like the backstory of it is like, no, like this took us like 2 or 3 years of getting to that point where we could make this thing, and then it was a big success. So I mean, again, I think that there's always going to be some failure, or in your case, I think it's more about like, you got to put in all the hard work to build it up to that point. Otherwise, it's all the other projects that led to that point that make it a huge success. So that's the other, I think, probably the biggest key thing with anything is, shit takes a lot of hard work. Nothing is just hit a button, the on switch, and everything just works. It's a lot of planning, a lot of hard work and dedication, but then you get to enjoy the benefits. And I like the idea of like, do you want to work hard when you're young, or do you want to work hard when you're old? You put in the hard yards now, and then later on, you got a lot more freedom, rather than deciding, okay, well, I'm gonna take it easy when I'm younger, and then suddenly when you're a lot older, you're still doing all the hard yards, and that's usually when you want to kind of taper back because you got family and other things that you got to take care of.
Yeah, I think too that often we just focus on the bottom line and we judge our success or failure by that. But I mean, if I don't have any kids, but if someone listening does, what is time with your young family worth to you? And like, can you put a dollar amount on that? And like, if you had just one extra day a week where you could take that off because you had your own income stream, what is that extra day a week worth to you? Like if somebody could just wave a magic wand and say like, okay, cool, now you've got Fridays off for the rest of the year. What would you pay somebody? And think in terms of that, and like how, that's one way where you can start to judge the intangible success, because I think that's really at the backbone of everything that I want to do. And why I do it is because I know that there's freedom attached to it. And I know that there's opportunity and possibility because there's time for that stuff. It's not, I'm not on the hamster wheel. I'm not, consuming too much so that I don't have any money to spend on the things that really matter in life.
Yeah, that's really great. And like, I didn't plan to talk about this, but one episode I did like literally about 2 weeks ago, actually, and the whole intention was just to kind of get people to kind of think a little bit outside the box. But this industry, and like from your experience and your ideas, like, is there anything you would suggest in terms of like just dropping some ideas of how people can apply their skills to go and monetize it into a business? So I mean, from like creating 3D and 2D assets and stuff like that, or whatever. But do you have any kind of like, I'm putting you on the spot here, but ideas that you can think of how to like people could make money on the side, or create a little bit more financial freedom for themselves using the skills that they currently have?
Yeah, I think this, I don't know if it'll sound obvious, but I feel like everybody's striving for the same thing when you're in sort of that quote unquote industry mindset. But there's a lot of opportunities elsewhere, and it might take some time to figure out what those are. But I mean, like I see people doing 3D printing on Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And why is, there's one, I forget the name of it now, but it was like this Day of the Dead skull, and somebody had 3D printed it. It looked pretty cool. But when you saw how much it was making on Kickstarter, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Because it was making so much money. But my feeling is that there's not a lot of people doing that. But when you're an artist, it's sort of like that's pretty saturated right now. Like you want to be specializing if you're an artist, and that's what guarantees your security. But then there's all kinds of other industries that need 3D people that you're just not thinking about what those industries are. But I'm sure that you could call up, let's say you called up somebody that's making 3D printers, and you say like, what industry sector is buying the most 3D printers? And then start hitting up those companies and just saying like, hey, do you guys need any help with your 3D work? And what I found if you're willing to do cold calls, you'll probably have, quote unquote success about 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 times. Yeah. So you'd have to do 20 cold calls, and somebody will be like, yeah, we've been desperately looking for a 3D person. We can't find them anywhere, because they don't know what you know. They don't know about CG Society or whatever these websites are that we're all looking at every day. This is a completely unknown world to them. All they know is that they need stuff made in 3D. They've got a new prototype that's been sketched out or something, and they don't have the person, or the person they had left. Maybe the person was there for 30 years and then they retired, and now they're scrambling. Or maybe they live in like a second tier or a smaller city and they can't find anybody. So I think that this is one thing. Obviously, like you mentioned, selling assets, I think is one, but that's really a volume play. Mm-hmm. Like when I looked into selling digital photography, it was sort of like you needed to have a portfolio of at least 700 images at the time to make, a couple $1,000s a month.
Yeah.
And 700 quality images, not just, you walk around your house with your iPhone and all of a sudden you're there.
Here's my cat in 50 photos.
Yeah, I think there's also opportunities for mentoring people locally, like getting paid well to help somebody get into the industry or take that next step, because often, at least from people that I've talked to, that school doesn't prepare them. or they're learning things that were maybe relevant a little while ago, but they don't know what's relevant today. And so, who's to say you couldn't get paid $50 to $100 per hour to help somebody get their first job? And it would be completely worth it to them, because their diploma or their degree or whatever they have is almost useless without you helping them to sort of sharpen their sword and get their foot in the door.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's really valuable. And that's just it. Like, I think a lot of people, I think I've already said it, but like they have this angst to do so much, but then everyone just kind of curls back up in a ball when they're actually given the chance to act. And like, I talked a lot, when I was at Bora last year, I talked a lot with a lot of people there about kind of their big moment about when they kind of got out and had their major success. And it almost always was that they had this opportunity where, it was their big break, and it was a matter of saying yes. And I think that most people, when they're actually given that opportunity, they curl up and be like, nope, I'm going to fail, and they go back to what they do.
Yes, exactly.
The ones that do say, you know what, I'm going to take a risk, I'm going to do this, they never look back. And, and I also think that, you don't have that one opportunity. You have shitloads. It's just a matter of for you to go out there and make them. So if you're going to cold call and get off your butt and do stuff, then that's you creating opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think the same thing applies with business and being an entrepreneur, that you just say yes and you don't know how you're going to do it, and you do your best, and it's okay if you fail. It's okay if you fail out spectacularly. Because like going back to when I started, it's like, hey, my friend told me that we have an opportunity to work on XMen 2. If you can teach me how to use Character Studio, and we put together an animation reel each. And I was like, yeah, I can teach you that. He was, he was the animator, and I knew Max. And then it was that, but we went in there and our reels were terrible, but we just said yes and said, we'll give it a shot. And they're like, yeah, okay, can you start tomorrow or the next day or whatever it was? And we came in and built our desks, and sort of like the rest is history. That's
awesome. That's really cool. I love that. And I'm just kind of curious, like, I know we haven't got too much time, but like for you, since you left Winnipeg with a plan and everything, like, what are some of the things you've done? And, because every time I spoke to you, I'd be like, where the hell are you now? You're like, I'm in, Thailand, or I'm over here. And I could barely keep track of all the places you're going. So, I mean, I love that, because you essentially took the experience that you've had and you decided, you know what, I'm going to do something bigger. And I want to make this passive income. But it's essentially, you're saying, I want to make my own living rather than feeding off of the teat of a bigger company. So, it's more about, okay, I'm going to create like a bit of financial freedom, so that way I can do what I want to do, and I'm going to work hard and work my butt off to do it. But it means that I can have all the things that I want to have. So when you left Winnipeg, at that point, like, what are some of the things you've gone and done, or what are some of the highlights in terms of places you traveled, or some of the accomplishments that you've kind of generated from that?
Ooh, that's kind of a tough question, but so let me think. There's a conference that I go to every year in Thailand, so that's kind of my October, and that my calendar is kind of based around being in Southeast Asia in October. And Thailand's amazing. I've gone to a few entrepreneur retreats there, which is really cool. You get to meet other people and hang out and do fun activities, and basically just get treated really well, and then work on cool ideas. I recently, I found somebody that I really admire and that I wanted to mentor me. I didn't really know how to approach it. So I just thought, hey, I'll just go to where he's at in Mexico and hang out with him. And
I remember that.
So now I'm, we're working on some physical products, and I'm working with him. And so he's mentoring and working with me directly. So I got, I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I was where I was. I went and took that show, International House Hunters?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I basically did my own International House Hunters tour through Belize, which, if you don't know where it is, it's just sort of on the southeast coast of Mexico and the Caribbean. And then I also went through Mexico looking for houses, and I actually did find a house, and then got robbed the next day, and I decided it was a little bit too dangerous of a spot for me. I went to like China and traveled around through there and did the whole Chinese New Year. I went to Songkran, which, believe it or not, the whole country, I think, more or less, and the place where I was at in Chiang Mai, it turns into a water fight. So you walk into 7-Eleven and the shelves are just lined with water guns, small ones, giant ones. as well as like those little necklace packages where you hold your cell phone so it doesn't get wet. And the longest I lasted after walking outside of my hotel was 5 minutes before I was completely soaked. And it's like this for a whole week. It's just mayhem.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Where is that?
That's in Chiang Mai, Thailand in April.
Cool.
I traveled through Europe. I work with a virtual team, so my business has staff, and I was able to go and meet everybody. I went to the Philippines and met and hung out with the guys there. I went to Atlanta and hung out with somebody there, and I went to England and hung out with another employee there. Yeah, there's just, I don't know, it's kind of like whatever seems to make sense for me to be, then I can be there and do that. And it's not like I'm constantly jumping around, hopping on planes, going here and there. It's usually like slower travel. So I'll be somewhere for a month or 2 months. And a lot of times it depends on what visa you can get. But it's like nothing's holding me back from doing or seeing anything. Like the world is actually a very affordable place once you start to get on the road and you realize how to manage your expenses and whatnot.
I think you can grow so much as well doing that. It's one of those things that kind of puts you into the position of, okay, I need to think for myself and make plans and organize stuff. So I mean, just traveling by yourself, it forces you to grow so much, I think.
Yeah, I remember that first year back in my early 20s when I went to China, and I really feel like that 1 year in China was the equivalent of like 2 or 3 years of being in Canada, because you're just like, you have to figure out so much stuff and your brain is constantly challenged and adapting, and you get a lot of experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm just kind of curious, when you decided that there was a guy in Mexico that you wanted to mentor you, I mean, how did you initially approach that?
Well, I had known him before, so I just said, hey, I'm going to come down to the area. Hopefully we can hang out. Because I wanted to check out the area anyway, so it wasn't, even if he said, I'm too busy or whatever.
You're like, all right, I'm just going to sit everywhere you're sitting, and eventually you'll have to talk to me, asshole.
But, so yeah, I knew that even if he didn't talk to me, that wouldn't be a waste of time, because I wanted to go and check out the area, and it was cold at that time during the winter, so I wanted to be somewhere warm. And one of the things is that when you are, it doesn't matter really who the person is, if they're kind of in an out-of-the-way place and you've traveled to go and meet them, it's almost like they have to meet up with you. At least in our space, I think for like entrepreneurs and artists, I remember I met Rob Chang, who did the cover for one of the early expose books. And he was like an hour or two away in China, even though he's from the US. I was like, hey, I was looking at your profile. I saw you're in China. You want to meet up for coffee and food? He's like, hell yeah, come on down. And so I went and met him and his wife and hung out for 5 or 6 hours. And yeah, it's amazing things happen.
It's kind of funny like that. Like John Montgomery, who's one of the founders of Effects PhD and Effects Guide and all that stuff. Like he's from Chicago, but I just realized the other day that he's now in Venice. So, I was going to email him today and be like, hey, let's grab lunch because you're over here now. And yeah, I think that's it. Like you have those commonalities, so you kind of feel like, all right, like let's meet up. And again, SIGGRAPH next week. I've got so many people who are, wanting to catch up just because they're in town. Or the Emmys. It seems like my place is going to become a halfway house for a lot of those people because everyone's flying over for the Emmys, but they don't have a place to stay. So it's like, great, you're going to win an Emmy Award. This is like 2 people now who are both crashing on my couch for the Emmy Awards just because they're flying over here. So, but yeah, it's kind of like you build this circle and you kind of, you're all in this kind of small circle together, and therefore you all kind of want to meet up. And usually it's when you actually do that, when you get out of your comfort zone a little bit and make time to meet with people. It's like that 5 or 10 minute meetup ends up becoming a business or friendship relationship down the line. So it's always really beneficial anyway to kind of network and build that group. Just out of curiosity, like where is so far the ultimate city in terms of all your travels and where you've experienced so far?
Ooh, that's really tough.
Come on, man, you've been doing the homework.
Yeah, but I like from places that I've lived, I really like Vancouver, Canada. Although in the winter, it's not a good place for me because the gray really plays with my emotions. But Summer City, it's amazing. Overseas cities, let me see. I really liked this place in Mexico called Huatulco. And it's an up-and-coming tourist destination where the tourism board is developing it, but they're trying to do it in a more sustainable way than what happened with Cancun and Cabo.
Right.
But yeah, my ideal place is going to be somewhere that I'm in the same time zone as North America. So Vancouver stands out, Huatulco stands out, and this January I'm thinking about going to Panama and checking out what it's like there. Another shout out, like Malpais in Costa Rica, I thought was amazing. It's a little surf town, and they've got a really good beginner surf area where you don't have to worry about hurting yourself or whatever on the rocks. And I thought that place is really cool.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm actually kind of looking around at the moment for a place to get away because I never go on vacations and I want to just go somewhere by myself because probably one of the best growth weeks of my life was I just finished up in Germany. I was burned out, first time ever, and I went to Thailand. I went to Singapore to speak at a conference, and then I went to Thailand. And I just sat at a beach for about a week, just reading books and kind of planning out my life. And that 1 week by myself was just amazing, and I kind of want to do that again. So I was looking at either Buenos Aires or maybe Costa Rica. So that's really cool. And maybe I can crash into you in Panama or something.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And just out of curiosity, I mean, Pencil Kings has been around for a while, and you guys got a massive following. You're doing a podcast as well, which has been really cool. I've checked out a few episodes as well, been on one. And but like, what are some of your favorite elements of it? I mean, obviously you get to influence a lot of people and train them to have a keener eye and have a lot larger skills. But what are some of the things that you guys are doing?
I think one of the cool things about Pencil Kings is that we bring a lot of different artists in to teach. So like I was talking about before, I'm not a big 2D artist. I was always a big 3D artist, and eventually an art director. So I can still look at 2D art and art direct it, but I'm not a technician anymore. And so we look at what people are doing, and then there'll always be like something special that you see when, you know, like one artist might be really great at rendering hair, and so we'll be like, okay, cool, can you do a lesson on hair because you're clearly an expert at this? Mm-hmm. And so we'll bring that person in and do the lesson, and then people can learn from it. And so I guess because I'm not the face of the company and because I'm a beginner artist, it's a little bit different than a lot of these a lot of other sites, because when we're looking for instructors, I'm looking at it through the lens of the beginner's eyes, or like the things that I want to learn. And I'm really in touch with a lot of the customers or the members of the site to see what they're interested in and try to ask those beginner questions. So we really, initially, I think we wanted to do it in terms of, you know, trying to become a concept artist. And I think there's a lot of people doing really well at that. But what we've found is that there's a lot of people that just need encouragement and they need a helping hand. And this is something where I can really help them along, because I've done the art career thing. I climbed the ladder, and even though it was 3D, a lot of it still applies to 2D. And so I can help them along that way. And so my focus is just like, how do we build the best system for these members? Like, how do we listen to them, take their feedback, and build really cool systems for them? And so I think for me, it's more of like a business and systems challenge. And I look at it, the website is like, this is my canvas. This is my piece of art that I have to make it as good as possible for the members.
Right. That's awesome, man. That's so cool. And so if people want to check that out and check you out, what is some of your information that I can post in the show notes?
Sure. People can go to pencilkings.com. And if you want to look up the podcast, you can look it up on iTunes and just search for Pencil Kings, or the podcast is also available from the website. And cool. I think that's about. I'm not a big social media guy, so although we do have,
check me out on Twitter, Pinterest, Periscope.
No, that's not me.
Here's my MySpace.
We do have a Facebook page where we feature an artist of the day, and if you're interested in having your art featured, get in touch through the Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/pencilkings, and there is a Twitter account and a DeviantArt account, but staff members run those various channels, and they're more than happy to interact with you. But if you want to get a hold of me, probably the best way is just through inside the Pencil Kings community, or if you contact support and say this is directly for Mitch.
Mm-hmm. Great, man. That's really cool. And just kind of curious, I mean, if you were to give some advice to someone who was currently at their job and they're looking to kind of get a bit more freedom to go after their goals and do something more with their life than just kind of producing work for a client who's doing it for another client who's doing it for some, corporation or whatever, what would be some of the key steps, and I know it's such a open-ended question, but like, what would be some of the key steps you would say to, if they have an idea, but to take it from an idea to reality? I'm screwing you here. It's such a massive question. But...
No, not at all. Like I would say, what, like, let's say it's Monday and it's a new week. You're like, you know what? I just listened to this podcast and I feel inspired to do something about my idea. Make something by Friday. Like, give yourself a really hard deadline and just say, by Friday, I'm going to have this thing done. And if you have a wife or a girlfriend, a husband, boyfriend, or whatever, just say, I'm going to do this thing by Friday. I want you to support me in this and push me because I feel afraid to do it and I feel like I might fail at it and I just really need your support. And then just do it and don't worry about if it's crappy. Go check out drawingcoach.com and look at what that looks like and say, like, dang, I can do better than this guy. And you can. And I think like that's part of the message, that it doesn't have to be perfect. And if you're trying to make something perfect, it's like you don't even know what your audience wants yet. But just do your thing and do it really quickly and see how quickly you can get to failure. And who knows, you might be successful on your first go.
Yeah, being accountable, I think, is one of the biggest things because, as soon as you do that, then it's like, all right, now I got to do it. And, there's even times when, if you announce, hey, I'm doing this thing, then people are going to check in on that. So if you don't want to be the one to say, oh, yeah, I tried and it sucked, so whatever, So by making yourself accountable, by other people pushing you or expecting you to have this result, it's going to make you have to work that much harder to get it done, rather than like, one day I'll do this thing. So, because, I will just say that, like, my pet peeve is when I meet people who are like, I've got this $1 million or $1 billion idea. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure we all have thousands of those, but it's a matter of the ones who actually get off their butt and go and do something about it are the ones that, succeed. But everyone else who has ideas are just exactly that,
And then I guess another thing to do is, if you're afraid to do the thing or you have some resistance or something, spend some time outlining the worst case scenario. Like, I'm not sure if you've talked about this before, Alan, but it's really powerful. And it's something that if you've read the 4-Hour Workweek, it's in that. But you forget about it really quickly. And you're just like, okay, if I do this thing, let's say you're in a job right now and you want to create a training DVD, let's say, about something that you're doing. And so you say, okay, what's the worst case scenario? I put out this training DVD, nobody buys it, and I don't sleep at all. And because I'm really tired, then I get sick. And then, I'm really a downer to be around. And my wife ends up divorcing me in that 1 week. And then my work finds out that I released this training video and it was unauthorized. And then they fire me. And then I'm broke and, blah, blah, blah. You just make it really ridiculous.
Yeah. And then
really define your fear.
You get up in the show bum fights and you're being paid to fight other bums, and it just gets worse. And then an earthquake comes in LA and the UFOs that are in all the movies destroy the planet and Will Smith flies into space. Okay. Yeah.
But then flip it around and do, like, what's the best case scenario? So, you put out your product, it gets featured on whatever famous website, you get all these people buying it, and all of a sudden you're getting interviewed, and then you get a book deal out of it, and, blah, blah, blah. The same thing the other way. Now that you've defined both of those outcomes, negative and positive, reality falls somewhere in between those two. And I would say reality usually falls at about a 6 when you go like really crazy and really crazy negative. But just doing this exercise, it's like it deflates that fear balloon, and it doesn't have any more power over you because you've defined it.
Yeah. Actually, I met M. Night Shyamalan, and this is such a weird segue, but talking with him about, how he makes his films, and he always said that, like, essentially less is more. In other words, your imagination is way more terrifying than anything he could ever put on screen. So most of the time he's just playing with, you essentially coming up with the most terrifying thing that's going through your head. And the thing is that if you start to figure it out, like actually visualize and create like what the worst thing actually is, it's like, that's not so bad. But like before you actually define it, it's just a gut feeling. And that gut feeling is going to be every emotion, every trigger. And this is when you get more into the psychology side. But like, before you can actually pinpoint it and make it a physical thing, like you're essentially just relying on these gut feelings that are the things that have kept you from walking off of a cliff, like fear of heights or burning yourself, which is past experiences, touching the hot stove or whatever else. So, I completely agree. I mean, if you start to think, what's the worst that can happen? And you're like, okay, this is the absolute worst that could happen. Is that likely to happen? No. Okay, and what are all the good points of this? Like, these outweigh the bad so drastically. What am I waiting for? Like, why don't I just do it? And worst case, it's a week of my life that I don't get back, whatever. Or the upside is that I create a whole new life for myself and I get to do what I want to do.
I mean, that sounds pretty awesome, right? Whole new life.
Yeah. No, I think it's yeah, it's definitely one of those things. It's just you got to be in it to win it, and you got to get off your butt and go do it. But it's totally up to you to actually be accountable and make it happen. Whether it's getting up early in the morning and getting a few extra hours in there, telling people around you both to be understanding of what you're doing, but also make you accountable. So I'll also say that, like, for me, one of the big things is you've got a lunch hour every day of the week, and it's so easy to be like, oh well, my friends, like, whenever I say I'm gonna go and do my own thing, they give me a hard time or whatever. So therefore, I never get to have my own lunch period. But like, if you want, like, one thing I do a lot of is I just tell everyone, like, hey, let's have lunch Friday, and I kind of batch that together. Same thing if I'm doing industry drinks in LA. It's now once a month I see all my friends. But it's a way to kind of say, okay, well, if I've got all these people who I usually hang out with at lunch every day, why don't I just tell them Friday, let's all go get a beer and have lunch and hang out. And that way you've got 4 hours of the week that you can just have some time to yourself, even if it's just walking around or listening to podcasts and getting out. It helps just kind of give you that time to yourself, especially outside of your home environment and your work environment, to think about, okay, well, if I was to do this thing, how am I going to do it? Start planning before you can take action.
I've got one more thing, Alan, that I think is really important. So you've taken action within 7 days, you've deflated your fear balloon, and then the last thing is that once you've finished your project in 7 days, then find people who have actually done the thing that you want to do and show them your thing. And so, like, hey, I did this thing, or I put together this thing. What do you think of it? I'm an aspiring blank, whatever the person does, and I look up to you, and I really appreciate you helping me out along the way. And again, it's going to be a numbers game, but probably like 1 in 5 people, or maybe more, will get back to you. And this really can accelerate you, because they're just going to tell you, here's the secret. It took me 4 years to figure out blank, and I'm just going to tell it to you today.
Yeah.
And it just works like that.
No, that's great. You always hear the expression, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if you can find those key people that are able to elevate you, I think it's so drastic. Because again, like, everyone kind of gets in their comfort zone to get their friends who are all kind of at the same level. But if you start to find people who are better than you, or in some cases are an expert on that thing that you want to be an expert on or get better at, they're the ones who can kind of pull you up into that other level. So I really think that I kind of picture, like, you have a bunch of seats, like, let's say 5 seats that you should fill constantly. It doesn't need to be like this person's my mentor forever, but it's like, right now in my life, what are the people that I need to surround myself with, so that way I can get to my goal. And it's not about surrounding yourself with them to kind of use or sponge off of them. It's more about getting inspired and also having someone who can just tell you if you're crazy when you have ideas, but at the same time say, like, yeah, that sounds great, you should do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no, that's really great, man. Like, I think it's really sound advice. And what are you currently doing?
Currently, we're just working on marketing. We've finished building our platform, and it's just marketing time now, and have a bit more time. So I'm working on getting my sketching chops back, and
Nice.
learning a little bit about programming. So always keeping busy, always learning.
No, this has been really great, man. So I appreciate you taking the time out, and hopefully there's a lot of people who can gain a shitload from this, because I definitely can.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity to hopefully help some people out.
Okay, so I hope you found that beneficial. Like I said, for me, this is one that I've wanted to do for a while, just because Mitch and I get together a lot and bounce around ideas, and I'm always inspired by what he has to say. And at the same time, I think that he really has cracked the ultimate lifestyle. Now, it doesn't mean it needs to be building a training site or selling assets or whatever, and it doesn't mean that you need to necessarily leave your job. But I do hope this does inspire you to start thinking outside the box a little bit. Honestly, if you want, you can travel the world, all expenses paid, and work and freelance and do whatever you want to do. I've spent many years where I literally did not have a home. I think my very cocky or overconfident Facebook used to say, homeless with dollars and a passport. And it did kind of summarize what I did, though. I literally did not have a home for about 3 or 4 years, and I would just pick what cities I wanted to go to. I'd reach out to people in those cities and say, hey, I'd love to work for you, and then organize for the flight, the hotels, and everything else, which would be part of the package. Now, again, not saying that to show off or anything like that, but purely to kind of get your mindset into anything you want is possible. You just need to A, figure out what it is, and then B, start constructing a plan, which is again what I talk about a lot with having that vector. And so if it is that you want to travel the world, you can do that. If you want to travel with your family, again, I know people who do that. One of the guys I want to get on the podcast is Neil Blomkamp's right-hand man. He's someone that I've worked with for many, many years, and he literally would travel the world, bring his 3 kids and his wife. They'd be homeschooled and everything would be paid for, and he lived a pretty awesome lifestyle doing that. So you can do whatever you want. You just need to design the lifestyle that you want. Now, I did put together an episode not too long ago about building passive income and touching base on that. Again, if this is something that does excite you and does interest you, this is definitely an area that I have a lot of experience in, and I'd be more than happy to kind of really dive into it and go even more in depth. But for now, I hope this episode inspired you, motivated you, and got your butt off the seat, and hopefully thinking about ways that you can create your dream career. Again, it doesn't mean that you need to quit your job. It means that you can create that freedom, whether it is having a bit of a side income or whether it is taking a vacation and using that vacation to go work in another country or do something a bit more outrageous and fun. You can do whatever you want. Now, like I said, if you want to enter the contest that I'm drawing at the end of the month, and this will be a chance for me to sit down one-on-one for an hour or so and go through your goals and help build a step-by-step plan to get your ultimate career that you want to get to, as well as a follow-up later on to kind of see where you're at and maybe finesse and change things up even more or take the next step from there. This is something I'll be doing with the winner of the contest. So if you want to do that, and maybe it is that you want to build your passive income or your chance to travel, whatever it is that you want to do, this is something I'd love to work with you one-on-one with. Just go to iTunes, leave a review for this podcast. Again, 1 line, 2 lines, or you can make it as long as you want. Just leave a hashtag VFX1 at the bottom of the review, and I'll be calling out the winner at the end of this month. So that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have an awesome week.